Okay, Mayor's office, I just made you a co-host. You should be able to unmute yourself if you need to.
Hello, can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear you. And I think we're just about ready to get started. Want to make sure there's no one else in the waiting room. Give me a second. Okay, I'm going to do it admit all on the waiting room, and I'm going to take the waiting room off that people can join late.
Hey, John, this is Ted Wheeler.
Hey.
Katie, Kirkpatrick Tyler is part of our team.
He's a co-host and he's on the meeting.
Excellent, thank you.
Yep. So the people that I've admitted as co-hosts are Kirkpatrick, Southeast Uplift, and the folks from BAC.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
I'm sure I don't have anyone else that I've missed here. Hey, if you're a BAC board member, message me privately. I'll make sure that I promote you to co-host if you need to. We have transcription turned on, so you should be seeing subtitles underneath the screen, and we should be able to save that transcription at the end of the meeting. And the meeting, of course, is being recorded. So let me get rid of, let me make this thing a little bit smaller because it's blocking everything else on my screen. And let's go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. My name is John Kirpatrick. I'm the chair of the BAC. We know that this is an ambitious agenda that you see on the screen in front of you. We have about 40 slides, most of which have more than one question, and we only have 90 minutes. We spent the last week curating questions from our neighbors. That's most of you. We'll do our best to cover all of these. We'll ask the mayor's office and Urban Alchemy to follow up on the questions we can't get to. I'll keep my eye on the clock and set aside at least 10 minutes for open questions at the end. Use the raise hand button on your Zoom app to get in the question queue when that section starts. You can also submit a question via chat. I want to remind you that there are 2 additional sessions next week that are run by the mayor's office, not run by the BAC. You can find links to register on the Brooklyn Neighborhood website blog post from this week, and in the copy of the slides I send out, you'll find that in the notes section of the slide. You'll also find it in our blog post as well. I'd like to start off, as we start off with every meeting, with the BAC statement of purpose, which is that everyone is here out of the goodness of their heart. Everyone is here to help the neighborhood, keep the neighborhood strong and to make it better. It's important that we listen to every voice and give every voice its due. In that spirit, we thank everyone for respecting each other at this table, or virtual table, for giving them the space to express themselves, and for devoting ourselves to paying close attention to each voice. And I do want to remind everyone that the BAC does have an active code of conduct in force for all its meetings, and there's a link to the code of conduct on the slide there. I also want to read the BAC land acknowledgement. We start this event by acknowledging that Multnomah County is geographically located on the ancestral homelands of the indigenous tribes of the Multnomah, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Walala bands of the Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. We recognize that indigenous Native American communities still exist today, despite intentional attempts of genocide, displacement, and assimilation by white supremacy culture and system. And while land acknowledgements are important in helping us frame a sense of place and history, we recognize that they are only the first step towards reconciliation. I want to do a level set about what we know so far to make everyone understand how we're entering this particular meeting. An announcement was made last week that there is a sanctioned campsite going in place for 100 tents or 150 residents at 1490 Southeast Gideon Street. That site is in the Hosford-Abernathy neighborhood. It is not in the Brooklyn neighborhood. The Central East Side Industrial District is contained within Hosford-Abernathy, and it ends at Southeast 10th Street. So this particular sanctioned campsite will be firmly in Hosford-Abernathy and not in the Central East Side Industrial District. The Brooklyn northern perimeter is at Southeast Powell Street. So while this is close and adjacent to our neighborhood, it is not in our neighborhood. There's a 1,000-foot no camping perimeter proposed, and you can see that radius on your screen there with a drawing that we did. This campsite will be operated by Urban Alchemy. So that's what we know so far, and I know we've had a bunch of questions proposed by the neighbors. What I'd like to do is open it up to both Mayor Wheeler and Urban Alchemy, Kirkpatrick, Tyler, to give us a few remarks to begin with, and then we can get this going with the set of questions that we have. Mayor Wheeler, would you like to go first?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, John, to you and your colleagues for orchestrating this. I really appreciate it. I appreciate so many people showing up today to hear more about this. There has been a lot of speculation about what this model is and how it would work. A lot of that speculation, including some of what has been reported, is not accurate. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak to people directly about what we're doing. So a little bit of context, as you describe it, as level setting, which I appreciate. The number of unsanctioned homeless camps in the city of Portland has exploded. It's gone up about 50% over a recent 2-year period. There's currently about 800 encampments spread out over 146 square miles in our city. What we are seeing from service providers is they cannot hire enough outreach workers to connect people to the kinds of services they need, including behavioral health, which is popping up here in the chat. They can't do a reasonable job of reaching people. It's a mobile population. They don't get the kind of follow-up and consideration that's required to be successful. A recent poll of homeless individuals across the city indicated that 95% had never been provided an offer of any kind of service. And we also surveyed the population. We did 600 outreach contacts with the homeless population, those who are living out in our streets and other circumstances. And what that survey showed was that only 2 out of 10 would consider going to a congregate shelter. Of those individuals, 6 out of 10 would go to a structured camp along the lines of what we're proposing here. Specifically, if we could guarantee that they would not be swept from that site. In other words, it would provide stability. Number 2, that it would provide some semblance of hygiene, meaning access to toilets, access to showers, access to laundry and litter collection, things which are not readily available to people living in unsanctioned sites across the city. And third, and importantly, and a part of our service delivery structure that's currently a gap, which is missing, is connections to the kind of services that will prepare people to be ready for housing. 40% of the individuals in our survey indicated they had disabling degrees of either behavioral health or substance use disorder that they felt needed to be addressed. 20% indicated both. There's other data sets out there that suggest that those percentages are actually much higher. But the bottom line is, in addition to all the services that we currently provide, whether it's housing, shelter, motels, alternative sites, preventative services, we saw this as a critical gap in our service delivery structure. So we went about the process of looking for a service provider and locations to be able to provide these services. We have that, and we are confident that this type of program is an important addition to the suite of services we're currently offering. Somebody in the chat said, well, why not just take this money and invest it directly in mental health? The answer is because we're not doing a good job of connecting people across those 800 camps to those services. We need to consolidate those services where people are, and we heard that loudly and clearly from the population. Another question we frequently get asked is, why not just invest all of this in housing? And the answer is, we, as part of the resolutions that the council passed, set a stretch goal of 20,000 additional units of affordable housing. That's not pie in the sky. We suggested specific strategies, including asking our legislative colleagues to allow us to use tax increment financing districts to fund affordable housing, tax rebates, and other structures that could help investors invest more in affordable housing. And at the city level, we're in the process of identifying up to 400 additional sites that are shovel ready for affordable housing, and then combining that with the additional resources that we're already starting to see come from the state. We think all of those things combined create a powerful tool to help many individuals get off the street and stay off the street. So that's sort of the introduction. I also want to introduce KP. He's listed there as Kirpatrick. Tyler, we know him as KP. He's the fearless leader of Urban Alchemy. He's been a great thought partner to us and a leader not only here, but in other cities around the country, has shown terrific results through their organization. And they have been slated to be the service provider for this particular location. So KP, I might turn it over to you for just a minute to give some introductory remarks as well.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Kirpatrick Tyler. I serve as the Chief of Government and Community Affairs for Urban Alchemy. Really excited and glad to have this opportunity to talk to you all, but also to be in service to the Portland community. Thanks for the welcome. We have so much regard for the work that's already been going on, and look forward to partnering with other service providers, partnering with the surrounding communities, and most importantly, partnering with the residents who will serve at the Safe Sleep sites. We have a history of providing services throughout the country, 5 sites in San Francisco, 1 Safe Sleep in Los Angeles, that's 80 beds. And we're excited to bring the experience, the learnings, and the expertise to Portland to be in support of how we build up opportunity for our unhoused neighbors. So I know we've got a limited time and a number of folks and some questions, so I'll leave it there. But so glad to be on this call and to have the opportunity to engage.
Thanks so much, KP, and thank you, Mayor Wheeler. So let's go ahead and get started. Our first set of questions are on the topic of costing, scope, and neighborhood involvement. It's been reported that the operating costs are $5 million annually, which turns out to be $2,750 monthly per resident or $4,166 monthly per tent site. This led to the following site build on operations questions, and this is a multi-part, multi-slide question. What's the estimated capital cost to acquire and prep the site? What's the long-term plan for development of the site? And what's the term of the lease?
Yeah. So hi, everybody. I'm Sky Brocker-Knapp. I'm a senior policy advisor at the mayor's office. So the capital cost is obviously site dependent. I was just in a meeting kind of about the design of the site. That will determine the site cost. Capital can obviously be a range, but I would say the council has set aside, I think it was, I need to double check, but I think it was about $4 million for 3 sites. So kind of within that, each site will require a different amount of money for actual capital costs of that site. Obviously, communal areas, showers, kitchens, that kind of thing, and also the individual platforms and tents or whatever folks are living in. And then the long-term plan for the development is up to the folks who own the site. We're leasing the site. So the lease term is 3 years. We're still in negotiations with the lease, so but we've agreed to that timeline.
Okay, thanks. The next set of questions are on kind of the same topic. What's the ongoing monthly cost to operate the site overall and per tent site? And what's the projected occupancy per month? And could you compare it with the per capita cost to provide actual housing and supporting services to individuals?
Yeah, so I think we've laid out some of this, and we have an FAQ on our website as well. So we'll update that as soon as we have updated costs for all of these pieces. Again, it will depend. We're still in that design phase of kind of how many units can fit kind of on the site and who can be served in those units. So whether it's couples, it'll kind of make a different determination of how much it is per person, that kind of thing. But obviously we aim for high occupancy. We want folks to be making use of the site. So I'm hoping that you can actually maintain a higher occupancy level than we see in congregate shelter, which is often, a fraction of kind of 70% right now of congregate shelter spaces. So I want to keep it much higher than that.
Is that $5 million number close to the actual number that you're budgeting for, or is that number inaccurate?
No, I think that was kind of our high end of, potential kind of estimation for operating costs. I don't, it'll obviously depend on the site itself, but that's probably fairly accurate. And I think when you compare it, and we've talked about this before, but when you compare it to housing costs, to the mayor's point, this is intended as a site for folks who need to get kind of stabilized in order to get connected to those services, maybe aren't ready to go straight into housing. We see with some of our providers, folks that have issues with kind of behavioral and mental health, who really prefer to be stabilized kind of outside first. They've been outside for a long time. That's not everybody who's living outside. So these sites are specifically designed for folks who are chronically homeless, maybe not be ready to go indoors quite yet, and need to get connected to more services before they go inside. So I think I would just caveat some of the cost pieces with that as well. Obviously, we see the permanent supportive housing that we invest in regularly and heavily as pretty high cost as well. So I think one unit of affordable housing kind of that the Portland Housing Bureau puts together right now is about $490,000 a unit. Obviously, people can use that for years. So there's a lot of pieces that go into that. It's not really apples to apples as a comparison.
Could I also just add a little more commentary to this? It's, I frequently get asked, people take the cost, they divide it, they go to the month, and then they compare it to their rent. And they say for $4,166 per unit, I could get the nicest apartment in the city of Portland. I want to keep it very clear, though, this is not just a housing alternative. That's not what this is. If this was just a camp, I guess it would still be better because it would have access to litter collection and showers and hygiene and all that. But that's not what this is. This is a service delivery model. And for those of you who have asked, well, what about mental health services? What about substance use disorders? What about job training? What about access to health care? That's what this is. So we're working in partnership with the county to actually provide case management and support for those needs that have been identified on the street, for the purpose of then navigating people towards housing and off the street. So my not hidden goal here, ultimately, I don't want anybody to have to camp anywhere in the city of Portland. I want to connect people with whatever services they need to get off and stay off the streets. And this is, as I say, it's a missing service delivery link that has proven to be successful in other places, but that doesn't really exist here in the city of Portland at scale. And so that's the goal here. It's a service delivery model. I would also argue, and the economist in me just can't help this, it's not just direct costs. There's a cost to not doing anything. And the cost to the community currently is being borne in the hundreds of millions of dollars through a variety of ways. I've now listened to most of my bureaus come in and give their budget presentations, and each and every one of them are under pressure as a result of needing to manage the crisis on our streets. And so I ultimately see this as not only a humane strategy that can connect people to services to potentially help them get on with their lives, but I also see this as a way of helping the city to recover public right-of-ways and reduce some of the activity that we've seen on the street that's problematic, that costs us in other ways.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to go on to the next slide deck here. Portland Community Safety Director Mike Myers has said this is like a disaster declaration. There is no federal declaration that mobilizes federal resources, although Governor Kotek has already declared a homelessness state of emergency. What federal and state resources have been secured to support Portland's initiatives? Will you and the governor ask President Biden for a federal emergency declaration to activate federal aid? And what would you spend federal money on?
First of all, the decision about the state of emergency is with the governor. She has declared that. We requested it. She's declared it. As far as the federal government goes, this model is definitely on the radar of the Biden administration. I've met with the United States Interagency Council on Homelessness, and the director I know is going to be here next week. Additionally, the director of HUD, I've met with her on several occasions now to talk about this model. And if we were to have a federal declaration, we've asked, it has not been forthcoming at this point, There's a variety of services that we would invest in. Obviously, if we had complete latitude, it would be prevention. It would be emergency outreach and shelter. It would be wraparound support services like behavioral health and substance use disorder treatment, job training, and it would be used across that spectrum, and of course for housing. And the federal government is investing significantly in housing, and the governor and the state are also supporting significant new investments in affordable housing. And as I say, we're trying to create the pathway to make those dollars work as quickly and as well as possible.
Have you gotten anything from the governor yet with regards to this initiative? Last week it mentioned that you were going to be meeting with the county this week and the governor this week, I think.
I have met with the governor pretty much weekly since before she took office. I've met with the county chair regularly. I met with her yesterday. I met with her again today. And I would describe the level of communication as unprecedented.
Okay.
And we all agree, this is the number one issue. This is it.
Okay, next set of questions is around the 3-year lifetime, the 3-year lease that was mentioned
Hey,
up
John,
there.
Do you mind if I
Sure.
on the slide you have up, it also talks about neighborhood involvement. And I don't know if there's another section.
That'll be coming up towards the end.
Got
Here.
it.
We front loaded funding. So,
Got it.
Yeah,
Got it.
we'll get there.
All
Yep. The 3-year timeline. How will you determine if it needs to be extended, and how much advance notice will be given to Brooklyn residents? What will be the involvement of Brooklyn residents if it needs to be extended?
Yeah, so if it's in the proposed lease, it'll just be that 3-year timeline. I don't think the owners of the property are looking to extend that past then. Obviously, if we were to engage in that for some reason, that would require extensive community outreach beforehand. So, in my mind, that's, up to a year before any of those decisions are made. Leases take time to extend, obviously. So
Gotcha.
at this point, I would just say my guess is that it will not be extended past 3 years, given kind of our discussions with the property owner.
Okay. Next, alternatives considered. I think you've touched on some of this, so this might be more of a reference to what you said, but talk a little bit about what alternatives be considered to get people off the streets and then some sanctioned camping in the city. You're obviously not taking a housing first approach to this. You're saying that services are predicated on, that housing is predicated on services. That was kind of covered in the second slide. What are the metrics being used to select the sanctioned camping alternative? Is it best because it's cost effective, or is it considered most likely to be successful, sanctioned camping versus other alternatives? And why is the strategy a few large sanctioned campsites in some neighborhoods versus micro sanctioned campsites in every neighborhood?
Yeah, so let me take a stab at this. First of all, alternatives. We have considered a wide variety of alternatives. In fact, we've implemented a very broad spectrum of alternatives, from temporary shelter to more permanent shelter to alternative shelter sites, tiny home villages, motels, congregate shelters. There are very few strategies we have not tried in this community as far as shelter goes. Of course, there's other things that people are raising in the chat that also have an impact. Rent has an impact. The cost of housing has an impact. The availability and affordability of housing has an impact. We live in a state that has amongst the highest needs in terms of behavioral health, and yet we're consistently ranked 49th or 50th. That's definitely contributing to some of the issues we're seeing on the streets. You may not know this, we are the #1 meth use state in the United States. When it comes to the new synthetics like fentanyl, we have the highest youth death rates in the United States, up 988% over the last 3-year period. So the goal here again isn't just to throw up a tent camp. That's not the point. The point here is to begin the deliberate process of rebuilding the behavioral health and substance use disorder and public health infrastructure that's currently lacking in the community. And in terms of sites, we're still evaluating sites all over the city. We want to be geographically diverse, but we are looking at sites across the city. Some people have mentioned, in fact, quite a few times on the chat, that they have not heard anything about this site yet. We know that. We have evaluated a number of sites where we go pretty far down the road with the owners or the controllers of those sites, and either it doesn't pan out, or we find there's impediments, or it's not appropriate, or it's not close to transit, it's not close to services, or there's other aspects to it. But once we have identified a site, that's when we let people know. As soon as we had I'll call it a tentative agreement on this site, we sent out a mailer to thousands of people in the local community. We're still shaping how this would look and asking people what they would like to see included. And this is part of that process.
Okay, and I think probably it would be best to follow up on the last question at some point as well, which I think has been a source of some of most of the questions that we've gotten. But I think we'll move on. But it would probably be best in your FAQ to address that as well.
And this is
Housing
First Initiative. Yeah, John, I'll just quickly to that last point. So there are many micro villages around the city that the city helps manage and creates permits for and deals with directly. And obviously the Safe Rest Village model is similar to that. So we're implementing those strategies as well. This is not, an exclusion of anything else. So this is all along a continuum, and different solutions work for different people and different populations. And I would just say, this is a housing first approach, because this is getting folks connected to that housing that they previously haven't been connected to before. So it's a way of connecting them with those housing navigators and actually getting into permanent supportive housing or whatever makes sense for them.
Okay, we can probably agree to disagree on that one, but we'll go forward. Urban Alchemy has a mixed record in building out and operating sites in California. Folks have asked us, we got a lot of questions on this one. How will their performance be measured? How did the worker lawsuits over labor violations figure in the evaluation? What local organizations bid on the contract, and what factors led to local organizations not being selected?
Yeah, so performance metrics will be determined. I would love for community engagement to be part of that process, determining what performance metrics make sense, especially that are neighborhood specific as well. I think for us, the outputs and connection to services are the main performance metrics. So there's been some discussion in the chat about how this plan connects folks to those services. We, as the city, are in charge of human services. Multnomah County is. So we are in direct conversation with them on partnering on providing those services, as well as numerous nonprofit providers and the CCOs. So, Care Oregon and folks that work with our Medicaid clients around the city and the region. So those services will be connected via various partners that are in charge of those services. And we're really excited about those partnerships. And then also the connection to housing comes from those housing navigators that the county runs. So we'll work directly with them. We're also part of Urban Alchemy's model is to have care coordinators on site. So people who can actually work individually with each resident and figure out what their individualized plan is for their success, what they're looking for, what services they want to be connected to. So I can let KP kind of talk about different Urban Alchemy kind of questions that folks might have. I will just say in terms of the RFP process, it was a competitive bidding process. We did 2 discussions with providers, invited a lot of providers. I spoke to a lot of providers individually as well, and discussed this model and invited them to apply. We did not have any local providers apply. So there were 2 providers, one from Washington and then Urban Alchemy, who applied for this contract.
Thank you. KP, I know you probably cannot comment on pending legislation. I want to make the audience know about that. But there was some concern over the labor violations that have been alleged in lawsuits against you.
Yep. So we'll start there. I guess the chat is pretty hot. The labor violations, all of those have either been resolved or settled. There's not a bunch more I can say about that, but kind of the other kind of Urban Alchemy greatest hits when we enter into a community, Sausalito, Echo Park Lake, and now 7-Eleven Post, which I saw come up in the post. When we talk about us having a mixed record, I would like to be very clear. We're talking about editorial stories that have been written about us, not necessarily if you pull the data on our performance, not if you are looking at what's reported by reputable media outlets outside of their editorial board. Actually, those records are pretty consistent. When those talk about our work, they talk about the success that we've had in engaging residents. When those talk about our work, they talk about the impact, the positive impact that we have in communities. And when we look at those, we are also talking about the response from residents who live in those sites. So I do just want to be clear that when we say there's a mixed record, that the predominant information that's used to make that type of assessment is based on editorial writing from local kind of activist-based papers. When we talk about the Standard, when we talk about the Chronicle, there are clear connections and relationships between them and organizations that maybe, take issue with Urban Alchemy. But when we look at what can be vetted, when we look at what can be, like publicly documented, if you go to any city where we serve and you sunrise or look at the number of reports that are filed against Urban Alchemy, it actually tells a different story. And it actually points to the success of the model that Urban Alchemy uses. And probably more important than all of that, when you talk to actual residents who are being served in our sites, that story is different. And that's not to say that we're perfect. That's not to say that we don't have challenges and that every person is perfectly happy. It's to say that we have a really great engagement record with our residents. It's to say that even when residents maybe figure that we are not a good fit or our sites are not, that we work really hard and in earnest to support them in the best way that we can. And finally, that when we do work with folks, that we have been really great at helping them to transition to permanent housing solutions as they are available in the communities that we serve. That's been true at the Arch in Austin. That's been true in San Francisco and Los Angeles. When we talk about Sausalito, what the actual record for that incident is that the judge threw those cases out because they were not accurate. The instance again at 7-Eleven Post, what we don't talk about is that gentleman who was involved in that shooting was already a resident of the Lower Nob Hill community. He had worked for Urban Alchemy for a total of 2 months. That is because we always see it as important to hire folks from the local area who are connected to the community. That's true both in Sausalito as well as Lower Nob Hill communities. And so when you hire residents from a community, you also inherit some of the challenges that they may have. The gentleman involved in that shooting was already a Lower Nob Hill resident. He had lived there for a number of years. The shooting incident did not involve a resident from 7-Eleven Post, did not involve any other staff from 7-Eleven Post, and it was dealing with a personal issue that he had that unfortunately he chose to respond to in violence. So when we talk about those things, I'd love to just kind of put them in perspective. When we talk about Echo Park Lake, the truth is that Urban Alchemy and unhoused residents never had any engagement with LAPD. That LAPD's engagement was completely with outreach activists and advocates and reporters. And so while kind of the bulk of reporting happened about that clash between advocates, police officers, and reporters, what it does not talk about are the 120 people that had been housed that never were engaged by LAPD, and the 3 months of engagement and outreach that took place through partnership with Urban Alchemy, as well as other outreach bodies to help get those folks engaged and connected to some type of housing. The final thing that I'd like to highlight is our unhoused sisters and brothers go through. Encampments aren't safe. When folks live in encampments, they are consistently left at the mercy of dealers, of traffickers, of loan sharks. They do not have regular access to services. They're left to their own devices and dealing with their mental health and their safety and their substance abuse challenges. It is inhumane to say that we should just leave people on the streets until there's housing built for them. The reason that Urban Alchemy stepped into and took on the work of Safe Sleeps is because as we worked and engaged with residents, unhoused residents, they shared with us that oftentimes Safe Sleep is the type of program that they would engage in because they've been traumatized by the traditional shelter system, because they've been traumatized by congregate living shelters. And oftentimes programs and services take away, or programs and shelters take away just folks' feeling of independence. And so what we've seen is that all of our Safe Sleep sites nationwide have higher levels of bed utilization. We have longer periods of stay, and we have competitive levels of placement into other housing solutions. Our communities are built and based on input from our residents. We actually have talked about this from the very beginning, particularly when we talked about how we intend to fight the cold in Portland. Our model is to always talk to the experts. And for us, the experts are the folks that have been living in these encampments. For folks who live in encampments, they've survived the cold for a number of years. What we have is resources and support. And so we engage with folks, we hear what they've done, and then we add the technology and resource that we have to make it a sustainable solution. Our entire model is built and based off of engaging and connecting with residents and hearing them and using their input to build out our model. And so I'll stop there. And
thank you, KP. I know it can be difficult when there's coverage in the press separating anecdote from data. And I appreciate you. And I appreciate you going, because most stories are built on anecdote. That's how you build a story.
Oh yeah,
so, and we appreciate that. So what other the other questions we have on this topic, and we should probably step it up here a little bit. What other companies are being contracted? What are the contracts worth? How will that performance be measured? And will that performance data be openly available?
Yeah, so I'll just quickly, so like I mentioned, there was a competitive bidding process, an RFP process put on the procurement website, and we did numerous discussions with providers, kind of giving them background on what that process would be, and invited them to discuss any questions they had with us or our procurement folks at the city. Urban Alchemy will be subcontracting kind of for food providers on site. So they will be handling those contracts. And I've been in discussions with a number of folks who are very excited in the local community to potentially provide those services. Again, that will go through procurement. So we're not totally sure how much those will be yet.
Okay, but those will be available. Those will be available on the city website.
Yeah, so the procurement website, correct.
Let's move on to here. Neighborhood association involvement, and this is one that's near and dear to my heart in particular. The Central East Side Industrial District doesn't extend to this site. The city code outlines that it ends at Southeast 10th Street. Why was the CEIC included in the planning for the site? Why were they at the announcement last week? And why weren't Hand and BAC included in the planning for the site?
Yeah, so I can take the first question. So the Central East Side Industrial District or the CEIC Council, we've been doing a 90-day reset in that community. So we're on day, I think it's 57 maybe of that reset. And we've been working with them before that reset and then every day since. So they were involved because they're focused deeply on that area, not just, their own district, but also the surrounding areas as well. And they're very supportive of all efforts to try to bring services to folks that have been camping kind of in that area, just in the Central East Side in general. So why they were in that at that press conference was because they're very supportive kind of those efforts and want to be kind of showing that they are willing to partner and looking forward to partner with Urban Alchemy, and also just any nonprofits or any groups that they can support in that area. And then we obviously, to the mayor's point earlier, haven't been completely sure about this site quite yet. So it's been kind of in the preliminary stages. We're still in the planning phases. And so that's why we're engaging with neighborhood associations. We're doing 2 community conversations next week. We don't have a lease signed. We want to get feedback on performance metrics, on a good neighbor agreement, on different partnerships that we can create with the neighborhood associations.
Okay, you can understand that the impression was generated that this is intended to solve a homeless problem in CEIC and basically move those to other neighborhoods. You can understand the impression that generated, which is what we got a lot of questions on this one.
John, could I comment on that?
Sure.
Because I agree with that. And there was not an intentional effort, but I think everybody here, I would assume, understands that sweeps alone don't solve homelessness. It just pushes the problem around. And what we've heard from homeless individuals is what they're looking for, rather than just being moved from site to site to site. And there's legitimate reasons we do that. We move people, for example, out of high traffic corridors. And by the way, the early data is that the percentage of homeless people who are involved in traffic deaths has been cut in half since we did that. And I will remind everybody that was a very controversial proposition when it was done. But the bottom line is sweeping doesn't solve homelessness. It may solve public safety or environmental or public health concerns. But if we truly are committed to ending homelessness, we have to connect people to services, and it's got to be done at scale. Part of the issue with this type of encampment, this could hold up to 150 individuals. It's much larger than what we've proposed in the past, and we're going to have more of them. So we're trying to have an answer that addresses the scale of the homeless population in our community, and we're doing it through the intensive delivery of services, something that we're also not particularly good at. So we're partnering with our county partners who are experts in some of these other services. And one of the things that is appealing to me about Urban Alchemy is they don't have the typical service ratio of 1 person to 40, or as the head of usage told me personally the other day, he worked with a service provider where their ratio was 1 to 100. These locations will actually have a staffing ratio of 1 to 15, and they'll have regular check-ins. There will be specific rules. There will be specific protocols. And I think you're going to get to this later around safety of those who are in the camp, as well as safety for those who are in the perimeter. And collectively, I think it addresses a lot of the gaps that are currently existing in our service delivery system. And yes, it has to be housing. And yes, there has to be other on-ramps or off-ramps, but we see this as an important and critical missing gap. And yes, you've highlighted some of the negative news stories that exist for Urban Alchemy, but we should also have a slide that shows the positive results. The story in Austin has been extremely positive. And I personally have reached out to elected leaders and leaders in other communities that have Urban Alchemy sites, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. And so we're not assuming anybody is perfect or any provider is perfect, but we believe this provider with this particular model will be very successful in our community.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And as with respect to traffic deaths, Brooklyn has suffered the deaths of 2 unhoused people on McLaughlin Avenue in the last year. So we understand that those weren't even the result of sweeps. They're just from the dangerous nature of our neighborhood being hemmed in by highways on almost every side. So let's move on to the next set of questions so we can get those safety agreements. This is about the good neighbor agreement. How do we handle issues with neighbors inside and outside? How is site management involved in handling those issues? What's our escalation strategy? And how do disputes over accountability for livability issues get handled?
Yeah, let me just take the first piece and then I'll turn it over to KP, and KP may also want to reflect on something that was said a minute ago. But you know, if you guys want a good neighbor agreement, we'll have a good neighbor agreement. And if you want to help draft that good neighbor agreement, we want you to help draft that good neighbor agreement. This is not, you know, we're not coming to you with an agreement and saying, here, sign it. We're not even saying that we have to have a neighbor agreement, but if you want one, we want one, and we'll work with you to put that together.
Excellent.
KP.
Yeah, so just as a regular, not even attached to an agreement, Urban Alchemy's practice is to always view the community to be greater than the residents that are being served inside of a safe sleep. For us, the community includes stakeholders, residents housed and unhoused, business owners, because we all actually have to live together and work together in this space. What I'll say, just to kind of reach back a little bit, one of the positive aspects of Urban Alchemy, we see it in Austin, Texas. We've seen it in San Francisco. We've seen it in Los Angeles, is that we actually have been able to get folks to come inside without the need for law enforcement or sanitation. We've seen that engagement over and over again. That is because we, one, are 90% individuals who have homeless lived experience, are formerly incarcerated, with a focus particularly on long-term offenders. The reason that that's important is because what we found is in the recruitment of former long-term offenders is that there are tools and approaches that allow us to do this work from a different perspective. So if we talk about Austin, Texas, where we operate the largest men's shelter in the middle of downtown Austin, the Arch, when we took over that space, about 75% of that space was being used as administrative space for the previous operator. We took that and turned it on its head, where 15% of the facility is used for office space. The 85% of that facility is directly to support residents, whether it's for sleeping purposes or for programs and services. We've built relationships with the local service infrastructure to create stability and regularity where they can come and engage residents to have the types of supports and connections that they need. In terms of the surrounding streetscape, if you know anything about the Arch in Austin, Texas, you know that it was encamped not just by unhoused residents, but by drug dealers. We were able to transform that, again, not through sweeps, not through law enforcement engagement, not through sanitation, but through engaging men and women who are doing something because they have a need, treating them regardless of what activity they were engaged in with love and respect, and having conversation about what we were trying to contribute to the community and how we wanted to support the residents that live there. What that looks like tangibly is that we went and we planted plants on the outside streetscape. We put mulch out. We took the stinky porta potty that was sitting on the corner. We early in the morning at 4 a.m., everybody from our COO to, you know, a practitioner who it was their first day, we got out and engaged. We walked 2 miles with a resident to go get coffee, and then the next morning had coffee so that he didn't have to wake up and leave his, wake up early and leave his bed just because the site currently didn't offer something as simple as coffee. The reason I highlight those things is because they are actually a part of our service model, that we are people-based and people-focused. And when you do that, not just the residents who are being served inside of the site, but also even the folks who maybe make some money selling or dealing to the residents there are willing to get on board and make that a safe space. You don't have to take my word for it. Just like you look up Sausalito, just like you've looked up 7-Eleven Post, you can find the success stories that we have in every city that we're in, or you could go there and see it yourself.
Okay, let's keep moving on though. I think we're reiterating some points. We have a lot of questions to get through. Let's go
All
to
right.
the last one. This is actually an infrastructure issue that maybe the mayor's office can handle. We've had a lot of questions about the fire and rescue station number 23. Does this affect it at all?
No, actually, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So we know we've engaged Portland Fire and Rescue on this site, and they actually have been asking for us to have some kind of shelter opportunity in the vicinity because they actually have trouble getting out their fire trucks from that site with unsanctioned encampments in the area. So they're very supportive.
That I know that particular thing. And this, I think we should probably, I'm going to leave this question up here, but I want you to know that one of the gratifying things about coordinating this process has been overall 90% of the neighbors' questions have been about how can we help? Not necessarily endorsement of the idea, but look, if it's going to happen, we want to help because in Brooklyn has a reputation as the friendliest neighborhood in Portland. You can ask the Portland Marathon. They know that about us. We want to make sure that we can help. So there are questions about this. I think we'll leave this up here, and this is something we can follow up on. I'd like to move on to the prohibited camping zones areas now, which is there's been a specification that there's a 1,000-foot no camping zone around the thing. It seemed kind of arbitrary, so people asked, how did you come up with that? And would it include some of the problem areas that have been happening for a very important part of our neighborhood infrastructure, which is the underpass under 17th, which is very important to both to house and unhoused residents who go by bicycle or or pedestrians. So can you talk a little bit about how that limit was established?
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. Was established mostly through trial and error. The safe rest villages that were led by Commissioner Ryan, which is a different model than what's being proposed here. They had perimeters of 125 feet, and it didn't work. It didn't work for the camps. It didn't work for the neighborhoods, and so that's been extended. We believe 1,000 feet is a reasonable perimeter where people can be reasonably engaged a couple of times a day if necessary. With regard to your question, if there's some locations outside of that 1,000-foot perimeter or adjacent to that 1,000-foot perimeter, we don't have to be completely rigid. We would absolutely work with you on any potential areas of concern.
Okay, great. Actually, I think the next few are about that, which is, will there be signage, and which agency will enforce this? We don't necessarily want to call. We don't think that police should be involved because of the traffic above the record there. Will we get Portland Street Response involved? Who will be responsible for enforcing it?
Yeah, good. And I've noted one person's put in about 27 or 28 chats on this subject. And so I want to have the opportunity to state equivocally, this is not a police-based model. This is about engagement, and the service provider will be providing that engagement with folks who are in that 1,000-foot perimeter. And so I'll turn it over to KP.
Okay. Yeah, so first, before the site ever opens, our teams will be on the ground and talking to engaging residents. We'll look at what they're saying they would like to see in a safe sleep space, and then we'll make the connection to what they've said and how it materializes and looks actually on site. Right, I think as early as last week, our teams actually started having some conversations with the residents who live in the area. The other thing is that we develop really great partnerships with service providers who usually are already working with unhoused residents to kind of do what's called care coordination. So using the already existing relationships and leveraging it to get folks who are willing to come inside and really start those conversations on the ground, so that by the time the doors open, we already have some rapport and relationship built with residents. We're not responsible for putting up signage, but our teams are, we will have flyers and we'll be able to let folks know the timeline. And for people that maybe aren't interested in coming into the Safe Sleep, again, getting an idea of what type of housing they would be interested in and working inside of the system to see where folks could be connected.
Great. Let me move on to the next one as well. And I think this was addressed by both of you as well, which is there are hot spots that we've seen, particularly that dangerous location along Southeast McLaughlin, which has somewhat been alleviated by the Portland Park taking it over. The Southeast 9th Street overpass, the Powell Sky Bridge are hot spots, which are also in a dangerous area. So we have, it sounds like you said, we have some flexibility in working with you to help designate hot spots that we can use to recruit people for the site. That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, the short answer to that is not only yes, but I would look forward to working with you on those sites. And I think there's more we can do. There was some discussion around lighting in one particular location near transit that has failed or isn't working as well as possible. Those are areas where we're eager to work with you.
Great. Well, we'll work with you on that. Let's go on to safety and health questions right now. We've talked a little bit about this one, about our unfortunate accident rate with unhoused people here, simply because of where they're doing it. It sounds like you are going to work with us to prioritize our unhoused population in Brooklyn and Han. I mean, Kirkpatrick, it sounds like you're going to be kind of canvassing the area around the site to prep for doing it. So is that a reasonable statement for me to make?
Yes.
Okay. And we did have questions about, people who are car campers or RV campers. We do have some here. How will that be handled on the site?
Yeah, so there are a few different RV and safe park villages or areas that are being constructed right now and designed right now around the city. And for this one, we're still in the design phase to determine kind of what this site can hold. It is paved, which is great. But that will be part of the further discussions. I will just mention that there's a Safe Rest Village that will be like a Sunderland RV park that's going to open. There's a couple county ones as well that are going to open maybe later this year. So that's definitely an issue that we're seeing and something that I think, a lot of different governments are trying to address, not just the city.
Okay, so it sounds like something for future coordination as well.
Exactly.
On the safety side, we've actually had a reasonably good, it's not just the pandemic, but we've had a reasonably good record of safety here in Brooklyn. Brooklyn has always been one of the safest neighborhoods within the city of Portland, and we've gotten off to a good start this year. How do we help, enhancing safety? There's always this concern I have being built behind me right now. Over 100 units of housing. There were concerns about density coming into the neighborhood with safety concerns as well. How will we enhance safety for all the residents of the neighborhood, housed and unhoused? And how can we help people in the neighborhood understand how the sanctioned campsite has or hasn't affected the number of offenses beyond person? As I said, anecdote versus data, as we talked about before.
Yeah, so let me take these two. The first one is a big one, and we could probably do an entire session just on that top bullet point. But writ large, safety comes in a lot of different flavors. I think when most people talk about safety, they're thinking about policing. And yes, I have advocated for 300 new officers or personnel over a 3-year period. I made that pledge a year ago. We've hired 91, so we're on track to meet that goal. We're also changing the way we do policing around gun violence, the focused intervention team, the enhanced community safety team. We're doing efforts that are place-based, like the 90-day resets, but safety goes beyond that. Safety can be infrastructure. It can be lighting. It can be providing off-ramps for people who are living on the streets so that they can be secure. One thing I've just got to say point blank, for those who say we should just leave homeless people be and let them do what is currently happening to them on the streets. First of all, I just want to point out we had almost 200 deaths on our street last year. So the death rate for homeless individuals is highly disproportionate. The number of homeless individuals who died by violence highly disproportionate. The number of individuals who died in fires, highly disproportionate. The number of homeless individuals who died from traffic fatalities, even if they weren't driving as pedestrians, highly disproportionate. So while people may disagree with me about whether or not people should be given off ramps from the street, I fundamentally believe that to be the case. Now, the only way we're going to be able to do that is to have an honest acknowledgement that while everybody needs housing, that's not the only thing that everybody needs. The homeless individuals tell us directly that they need the kind of services that are being proposed here at this site. And again, with 95% of the unhoused population in our community saying they have never been approached by anybody with any offer of any service, that tells us we need to bring those services closer to where people are. This is one strategy to do it. It's not the only strategy, but I think it's one that will show great promise. And that's why I'm supporting this.
And I really do appreciate the points about, pedestrian deaths and traffic safety. We would love to see traffic calming measures on our major roads, both including Powell Boulevard and Milwaukee Avenue. And we do want to talk to you sometime about actually fixing Milwaukee Avenue because it's destroying buildings, but we'll talk about that separately.
You're going to find broad agreement from me on that. And on the last slide, the second bullet point, and this probably comes up in a lot of contexts, we need data. We can't just, homelessness is a highly emotional issue. I think we all get that. That's certainly reflected in what I'm seeing in the chat. And I spent a lot of time in the community and a lot of time in meetings like this. People are really upset about it. And what we need is to know what works and lean into that, and know what doesn't work and stop wasting our time and money on that. And so data is really important, and KP and I have talked about this, and John, you and I to a lesser degree have talked about this. I am very enthusiastically supportive of keeping data, including baseline data. One of the questions we get asked frequently is, how do we know what happened in the neighborhood broadly relative to the siting of an encampment like this? And one way you can all help us is get us the good baseline. If you have folks camped near your home or near your business, could you log it in the KPDX reporter, the Portland Reporter, and that'll give us a baseline, and we'll know what happens with regard to that. We already collect data around other types of incidents, gun violence, pedestrian safety, car crashes. So we could do a baseline, and a year from now or 2 years from now or whenever, we could compare those baselines. So I'm very interested in that. And if there's specific metrics, somebody had mentioned metrics earlier, that you would like us to collect, or information you would like us to publicly provide, we're very open to that. Just let us know what sort of metrics you'd like to see. For me, it's how many people do we get off the street and connected to services and ultimately connected to housing.
So the next question is pretty much about the same one, which is the understanding this. And I think the answer is fairly similar. You kind of covered it there, which is it's data that helps us figure out how this is going to affect. And we have to fight anecdote with data, or let data speak for itself in terms of if it does unduly affect things. I'm going to move on to the next one as well. This is near and dear to our hearts as well. During the presentation last year, it says there's a $250K allotment for those enhancements. Who's going to get that money, and how do we get input into how the money is spent?
Yeah, so this will be a direct conversation with the relevant neighborhood association. So appreciate you bringing that up, and would love to follow up on that and kind of what you think you need in what form, because obviously, to the mayor's point, safety can take a lot of different forms, and you know your neighborhood best. So
is it 250K overall? Is it per neighborhood?
No, per neighborhood.
Per neighborhood. Okay, that's excellent to know. Okay, great. And we will look forward to that conversation. Always love to have conversations like that.
And to be clear, that's not the total. Those are directed dollars.
Yep. Okay, that sounds good.
Continue to work with you on other issues as well.
Excellent. I think we talked about this one a little bit, and I know our time is limited. I probably have about maybe 15 minutes left before I have to open it up, or 10 minutes. We talked a little bit about, you know, connecting with PBOT and the Bob Stacy crossing. You talked a little bit about this before, making sure the lighting, we addressed this in the safety conversation, which is making sure we get resources so that the people who are going to be served by this encampment can reach it safely, which is also a problem now on that crossing. The TriMet station, we think we're going to see increased usage of that TriMet station, which is how a lot of the clients and residents of the encampment will be able to get to and from other parts of the city. It'll be very important that we plan with TriMet to plan for increased usage of that station to make sure that everyone using that station feels safe. We talked a little bit about that area being kind of the hub for getting in and out of our neighborhood, which is hemmed in on all sides by highways and railroads.
Yes. So let me just say we are in active discussions with TriMet, and they're very excited about this site and also want to work with us to increase kind of safety measures, increase lighting. We've already talked to them about those things. And I think, John, my understanding is you've also been kind of in contact with TriMet. So I think they've been really responsive. If not, let me know. But my understanding is that they're very excited about this site, and they've been in discussions with us as well as the neighborhoods.
Great. Knowing who to talk to is going to be half the battle for us as well. The other thing is ODOT as well. Southeast Powell, we've had a death on Southeast Powell this year. There are more and more threats of death on that particular road in and of itself, and we're taking things there. ODOT involvement as well will be crucial for us.
Yeah, so we work with ODOT every day on a variety of issues around the city. We have an intergovernmental agreement with them just on their right-of-ways within the city of Portland. So, yep, those are ongoing discussions.
Okay. That Southeast 13th Place and Powell crossing, which has a pedestrian-activated crossing light, is a particular concern as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so the drug use policy on the campsite is something that has been. There's people concerned that if what is the drug use policy? How will it affect drug use in and outside the campsite? Will it be used as a safe injection site? Will it be able to be used by anyone who visits the site? Can you address these questions?
Yeah, KP, it's not a safe injection or safe use site, but KP can probably answer those questions better than I can.
Yeah, so there's no kind of just open access for folks that aren't residents of the site. We have a no drug use policy, but drug use or addiction, which is really what the major concern is not a means for being evicted out of the safe sleep site. We operate under what is a harm reduction model. When we've identified that a resident is struggling with addiction, we have regular resources and services on site. We'll connect them with additional supports. And our teams are always trained for overdose reversals, as well as the usage of Narcan. And so we work to support residents. And even if in the event that they are under the influence, we take that opportunity to engage them, to take a moment to decompress the situation, but most importantly, to understand what is it that they use to resolve. Because when we talk about substance abuse, it's not the problem, it's actually the answer. That when men and women are struggling with addiction, it is usually an answer to something that they're suffering through. Our teams are engaged and work with residents who are in addiction to understand and to support, and most of all, to keep them alive, particularly because of the impact of fentanyl, to make sure that folks aren't dying from overdoses, which they're more likely to do on the street than they would in a safe sleep site with supports and resources and people that are there to serve them.
Okay, let's move on to the next question as well. If there's a no drug use policy on site, the question is, and a no weapons policy, we're worried that it will have the ironic effect of increasing availability of weapons and drugs outside the sanctioned campsite limit as people drop them there if they go into the site, or if there's drugs and weapons deposited with UA staff, how are they secured? There were questions about this, and I think it just stems from our confusion. Can you talk about this a little bit?
Absolutely. So for weapons in particular and for drugs, we store them safely in a locked safe that only the staff member who's on duty at the front is able to access. There's not much we can do about what happens for folks outside of a safe sleep site. What we do have is the ability to make the site inside safe. And so again, because this is low barrier, because this is harm reduction, we are not going to kick somebody out and return them back to the street because they have a weapon. In every one of our sites, we have voluntary bag checks. We build relationships. We welcome folks to turn over their weapons and drugs. And what we've seen by and large is because people feel safe at our sites that they're willing to do that. I don't know if there's an easier answer to that or a more direct one. We've seen it, and we've seen the success of what happens when we treat people with respect and build relationships. And none of our sites have had incidents involving extreme drug use or weapons being used against residents and staff. And so I think that's
okay. And I think this is also a question that could probably be handled by data as well.
Yeah.
And we talked about this a little bit, which is you are going to be doing some of this outreach as well. So I'm going to move on from that. Will there be children in the camps, or are these adult only camps?
Adult only camps.
Adult only camps. Okay, let's move on that. This is something which may concern you as well. This is right next to the railroad tracks. In fact, there's a crew changeover site on there where trains idle, diesel trains idle for 8 hours while crews change. How will this be measured to affect the health, to ensure it's not affecting the health of the residents? And how do we get access to that data?
Yeah, so we've directly engaged the Bureau of Environmental Services on this and like various other environmental issues like we would for any site analysis. So they can have answers to those questions. I can connect you, John, if you would.
Great. Great, that'd be great. We actually have some experience with this because we're measuring this in our neighborhood because of both TriMet and the railroad. So we'd love to engage with you on that.
John, could I also go back? There was a question that somebody in the chat wanted to have answered. And it's, the question about drugs or guns being dropped off outside of the site. Mm-hmm. First of all, I'm not aware that that is a problem. This is the first time I've heard of that as an issue. So, I'm not sure that's an issue, first of all. But here is what I would say to it. Our city is awash in guns and it's awash in opioids. The first thing I would say is if you see them stashed, call the cops. Do not touch them. If it is fentanyl, it can have serious health repercussions just by being exposed to it. So that would be my first advice. It is absolutely hazmat material. Ditto a firearm. But I think what you're going to find, and KP, you could probably speak to this better than me, they're going to want to protect both substances as well as weapons. And we're not just talking about guns here. We're talking about knives, sharps, pepper spray, whatever else. And my guess is they would prefer to have that safely locked away near where they are as opposed to left somewhere in a flower bed, but maybe I'm wrong. KP, do you have any sense on that one?
Yeah, so we've not experienced it. And I believe a part of that is because just our regular day-to-day model includes practitioners who walk around the site, the outside of the building. So one, we don't have a lot of activity or any encampment around the site. There's not folks kind of like hanging out and about in front of the site. And there's always staff that are monitoring the outside of the facility. And so if someone were to leave something intentionally or unintentionally, it's probably more likely that it would be found by a practitioner than by a passerby or a resident who was expecting, someone to leave something for them.
And Jesse, just FYI, yes, it can go through the skin. It can be inhaled. and it can actually overwhelm you. And if you do a quick Google search, you'll find that there have been first responders who have been overwhelmed by just opening the door to an automobile.
Sky, a lot of them are asking if it's voluntary, so maybe we can just talk about.
Oh, yeah, sorry. So apparently there's been some movement in the chat on whether the site is voluntary, or people will be forced in. This is completely voluntary. So no one's being forced into the site. It's just by choice.
And I'll leave my next question has is a little bit more lighthearted than the others. There has been said that there's going to be pets allowed in the camp. What provisions are being made for pet health? What provisions are being made for pet safety around those dangerous intersections? And what opportunities do concerned neighbors have to do with helping out with pets?
Yeah, so KP can talk to this too. I'll just say briefly, pets are allowed on the site. That's one of the reasons that we like this model, is because a lot of folks don't go into congregate or other shelter because of the pet that they want to stay with. And so the site will provide for that. We're also working with the county on their animal services division, because they control kind of those shots and tags and kind of all the pieces that you need to maybe keep your pet safe. But KP, I don't know if you have anything else that you wanted to add.
Yeah, and in all of our existing sites, we actually have pet medical support that comes on site regularly throughout the week. So, if folks need some type of specific care for their pets, that's made available on a regular basis.
Great. And if we have volunteers who want to help you guys out, we'll coordinate that with you. It sounds like we'll be, if the site's selected, it sounds like we'll have some interaction with you on how we can coordinate some things. Okay. I want to make sure we have enough time for everyone there. So we have a lot of other questions, but I wanted to kind of go through some of the camp governance stuff as well, because we finished all those questions. In this, we want to make sure that if the camp is established in this area, that we're able to work through problems reasonably. We wondered, was there a residence council? How will it work? How do we arrange liaisons at your meetings and liaisons at our meetings? And how do we arrange, updates from some of your staff at our meetings as well? We want to make sure this process is ongoing, so that you become integrated as part of our community. So can we talk a little bit about that? How is self-governance handled at the camps? Yeah,
so we don't have a resident council. I think that's a great model, and for the organizations that works for, we respect that. We don't have a residence council. Our sites are led through resident engagement, but we don't have like a neighborhood council for residents who live on the site. What we do host are monthly resident meetings, where residents are able to share any grievances or concerns. We have a regular grievance process that happens outside of that. So if a resident has a challenge or concern, they can submit a grievance that not only goes to us, but will go to can go to the city or if there's other places that they deem. Our site director will always be available to participate in the neighborhood association meetings. We not necessarily that they would be at every meeting while we're open to it, but on a regular basis, we're willing to participate. And if demand needs or circumstance needs, we're always available. We also make the site director a contact for them directly for the neighborhoods that are surrounding the site, so that if there are challenges, that the neighborhood has a person on the ground who they can connect with immediately. In terms of a resident liaison, it's not something that we've ever had, but we're definitely welcome. If the neighborhood would feel comfortable hearing and engaging with a resident leader, what we usually are able to identify is a person who's kind of bubbles up to the top as a trusted and noted resident. And, we don't mind.
Okay.
Opening up
That sounds great. What I'd like to do now, we have lots of other questions. I will follow up with you guys on the curated questions. I'm happy to open it up now to folks who want to get unmuted and ask their particular questions. We wanted to leave some time there. I see that Benjamin has raised his hand. I will ask him to unmute, which I think gives you the ability to unmute. Tell me if not, otherwise, there you go. Benjamin, go ahead and ask your question.
Sure, yeah, I just had a series of short questions, if possible. So I'd like to thank the Brooklyn neighborhood and the mayor's office and the mayor and Kirpatrick Taylor for being here. Thank you. So yeah, just concerning the security apparatus, I didn't get a clear answer earlier. Maybe I missed it. Will there be subcontracts between Urban Alchemy and any kind of security apparatus like Northwest Enforcement, for example, in the area, or will they be providing that security themselves? I know they said that security is in the hearts and minds of people, which I agree with, but I wonder on practical terms what that actually means, and will they be carrying firearms? As it
Right.
seems that some of them do carry firearms in California. So to get to the second question really quickly, and the other two will be very short, is what kind of subcontracts will they be cultivating? Skylar had mentioned something about food procurement, but I'm curious as to all the other services. Will that be going through the city, or that will be going through Urban Alchemy? I'm very curious about that because there's a big variety of services that the mayor had mentioned earlier. They all require separate contracts. And third is because Urban Alchemy will be receiving public funding, does that mean that they will be auditable? And will they be accountable for, after the 3-year tenure, the leases go up to the perceived $70 to $90 million that they will be receiving from the general RFP over the next 3 years? And if it's not just them specifically through the other camps, then anyone who receives those RFPs and bids, if they will be auditable. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
let me go ahead and answer that. First of all, with regard to security and guns, the answer is no. With regard to services, yes, we will be working with other local service providers. And one of the things I really appreciate about KP is when he got here, understanding that there might be some concern that they were from out of the community. He did a good job of reaching out to many of our service providers and starting to build those contacts and connections. And FYI, on that point, a lot of our local service providers are really stretched thinly at this point. There will be other opportunities for them to participate, but a lot of our local providers just weren't in a position to be able to do this at this particular juncture. With regard to other services, the county is a key partner here. They provide public health services. They provide access to behavioral health services. They provide access to substance use disorder treatment. We're working with work systems here in the local area around a potential job training and employment opportunity. We're working with the district attorney to reduce or eliminate past violations and help connect people to services. In other words, in exchange for engaging with services, people would commit to going down that path. Those of you here who have gone through substance use disorder treatment know that's a fairly difficult path. But to incentivize people into some of these programs, we'll work with them on eliminating past warrants and other violations. With regard to accountability, I didn't quite understand the question, Benjamin. Could you just rephrase it? I just couldn't quite understand.
I think it was about auditability. You wanted to know whether UA would be auditable, their provision of these services would be auditable.
Oh, yeah. Both to the degree that the city and the county are both involved, both the city auditor and the county auditor are potentially able to audit any aspect of these programs. Moreover, as I mentioned earlier, if there's specific benchmarks that you want us to manage to and publicly disclosed, we would very much like to have that conversation. We have our set of benchmarks, but I'm supposing people might have others that they'd like to add to the list, and we're really open to that.
Okay, let's power through some of the other questions. Griffin,
and yes on PCC, and I think the district attorney is already connected with them.
Yeah.
Griffin, I'm asking you to unmute. I'm hoping that's working. There you go. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hey, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. I grew up in this neighborhood. I went to Abernathy, Hosford, and Cleveland. I grew up in Hosford-Abernathy. Now I'm a homeowner in Brooklyn. I live right across from Powell from the site. I can see it out my front window, basically. I'm wondering, are there going to be volunteer opportunities for neighbors who want to help make this site a success? I understand it's controversial, I understand that a success isn't guaranteed. What can neighbors do to make the chance of success higher, if anything?
Thanks, Griffin. That's a great question. Really appreciate that. We've had some folks reach out already, kind of offering this similar services or volunteer kind of opportunities, figuring out how they can get connected. We hope that there's a wide variety of volunteer opportunities. So that could be from engagement on the site. It sounded like some folks had already asked about engaging with pet services for pets that are on site, but obviously there's opportunities for making the site beautiful, engaging with residents as they're willing and able to do. We could throw some community events. Urban Alchemy is well-versed in working with folks in the community and figuring out kind of what makes sense for that community and what that community can offer to the residents. But I think it's really touching to hear you say that. And I think there'll be a lot of opportunities. I think it could also be further discussions with the neighborhood associations on what makes sense and how we could all come together for different opportunities. So really open to anything that you're willing and able to do.
Griffin, we've also been very close contact with HAND, and we'll probably do a coordinated effort there. So stay tuned and please become involved with the BAC because we'll be doing some of this. Andy, I've asked you to unmute. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, John, KP, everyone in the mayor's office for this meeting. I'm a resident of Southeast Portland in the Hosford-Abernathy neighborhood. I have one child who attends Abernathy Elementary. I have one child who attends Winter Haven Elementary, both which are very close to this site. And I'm going to put back into the chat my images. I think I've posted them a few times, but you can use those links to see the overhead aerial images of just how close this site is to both Abernathy, 4 walking blocks by the Bob Stacy overpass over the train tracks. And it is also right on the safe route from the Hosford-Abernathy neighborhood to the Winter Haven that my older son uses to get to Winter Haven every day via bicycle. I realize that this site and all of this and what we're working through is a bit of an experiment, and we don't know exactly how things are going to work out. And I just wonder if this site is really not appropriate because of if things go wrong with this experiment, if things don't work out, we're risking children so close to this. And I realize that Urban Alchemy is going to do their best to make things safe and that the city is going to do their best to make things safe. But that hasn't always worked at Urban Alchemy sites and at other sites within Portland. So I wonder, is this an appropriate site given the potential for failure and how this is going to impact children? So I'm going to leave it to that. I'd be happy to hear an answer either from the mayor's office or KP about any of those things. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I'll take a stab at that, Andy. And I appreciate the question. And the safe routes to schools has been of concern to me. As you know, many months ago, I passed several executive directives, one of which, of course, was to eliminate camping in high crash corridors. Another one was focused specifically on the safe routes to school. And I'm keenly aware of the added potential risk. I want to reiterate that the service provider will be aware of that. The perimeter will still be focused on by the provider. They know that that is a potential source of risk. And I want to reiterate that the site is not an open site. You cannot just come and visit the site. It is a closed site. It is by invitation only. And so we'll be monitoring who comes and who goes. And so while I cannot guarantee anything 100%, I am personally confident that the security of the kids going to Abernathy is solid.
Yeah, and Andy, great question. So in Tenderloin mid-market, our practitioner teams actually participate in safe passage, particularly for students and seniors. I think what an easy fix and something that we would be open to is ensuring that during coming to school and, when school lets out, that our teams are out and visible and vigilant to ensure safety. And so I think there's some very pragmatic things that we're open to do, and just understanding kind of those concerns, we can implement some tools and resources to help mitigate any concern.
And John, I think we're at time, but I just want to make sure everyone's aware of those community conversations next week as well. The two.
Sure, I actually have a slide on that as well. Hold on, in here, there, oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's, in our own Brooklyn neighborhood resources, you go to our blog, the links to the 2 other sessions are on there. We are having a general meeting next week as well, where we're going to be talking about the property development that's going on in our neighborhood as well, which might provide housing for some of the residents of the camps as well. And on Sunday, we have our spring food drive for groceries for grout. I want to make everyone available of those opportunities. I am, I know we probably need to close out. You guys, the mayor office probably has time to do. If you have time to stay and address the other questions, that's great. Otherwise, we can close out this meeting. How does everyone feel about it? I can go for another few minutes if other people can. I know you guys are busy.
I am unfortunately booked back to back. I have a 4 p.m. meeting, so I cannot stay on, and I apologize. But there, as noted, there are other opportunities.
Right. Okay. So we'll just use those other opportunities if they're if we have to. So in closing, I'd like to thank everyone for participating in this meeting. I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. We also didn't get to some of the questions we have, but I'll coordinate with the mayor's office and KP on getting those additional questions answered as well. We will be putting up a blog post, which is a summary of this meeting. I'll put the video of the meeting up on the website as well as the transcript. I thank everyone for attending, and we'll see you at the other 2 sessions next week as well, where you can probably get your question in as well. And your questions that you sent here, I will open up the form again for submitting questions, and we can append them to this document as well. So
hey, John, I want to thank you very much for creating this space for all of us. I appreciate it. KP, thank you for also being here, and we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good evening.